But we want to get right to our next presentation, which is just terrific. And this is regarding Pilot Emergency Shelter for Men update. And this is something, a very important issue for our community. So we just want to welcome to the front here Beverly and Cheryl and Josh. Beverly Baker is the Director of Community Impact for United Way of Champaign County. Bev and her husband Dan and their two sons have been happy to call this community home for 10 years. She's been working with children and families for over 25 years, and United Way has just created this passion to make sure that every citizen's basic needs are met. And that's where Beverly's kind of coming from. Cheryl Palmer started as the lead pastor at Faith United Methodist Church a few years ago in the summer of 2014. Before that, she was in Edwardsville, where they created a half-acre mission garden that provides produce for pantries all over Madison County and the Metro East St. Louis area, which is really cool. And she also worked at emergency shelter while she was in seminary in Dayton, Ohio. And then Josh Foreman has a military background. And after fighting in 2 wars and being injured in Iraq, he got out of the military and began school. And then while working on his 3rd degree, he began volunteering at the Times Center and then working as a needed employee there. And he received some training from his then supervisor, Rob Dahlhaus, and ran the overnight crew. And then in August, he began working as the case manager intake coordinator of the Times Center, and in late December was offered the position of director of the men's emergency shelter. So you can see why we've got these heavy hitters to tell you about what's going on tonight. So Beverly, Cheryl, and Josh, I'm not going to talk anymore. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thank you. All right, well, I'm Beverly Baker. I'm the Director of Community Impact at United Way. And let me say, we didn't practice this at all. So we're going to be winging it up here, so hopefully we don't disappoint. My piece that I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight is what brought us to where we are right now. I want to give a little bit of background and history, and then Cheryl's going to talk a little bit about her church's involvement and the churches involved at this point. Josh is going to talk a little bit about kind of night-to-night operations at the shelter, how things are going and things like that. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's coming next. So a little bit of background. A year ago at this time, we had, I think, like 95 beds available for homeless men in this community. Even with all of those beds available, and they were full a good part of the time, we still had some men that weren't comfortable being in those shelters, or weren't able to be in those shelters because maybe they'd had issues or experiences that then they were excused from those programs. And just, you know, there are mental health issues and substance abuse issues, so sometimes they're just not comfortable being in those group settings, and the officer ahead of us talked a little bit about that. So even though we had these shelter beds, there were still men who would often find themselves out in the cold during the winter. So we mentioned a warming center. We had our friends with the Canteen Run and the Savoy United Methodist Church would have a pop-up warming center when the temperatures would get extreme cold. That was run entirely with volunteers, and they would watch the weather forecast. We'd work with our emergency management and law enforcement, and they would mobilize volunteers when they saw the temperatures dropping to those extreme cold temperatures. They wanted to be open more. They wanted to be open every night in the wintertime, but with all volunteer manpower, that's impossible to do. So they weren't able to be open every night, just those extreme cold times. So when we received word that the Salvation Army was going to be no longer able to serve homeless men in their Stepping Stone shelter, the Stepping Stone shelter is still open, but their program is different, their funding stream is different, and so they are serving individuals and households that through a hotel voucher system. So they're not open for that emergency shelter process anymore. Shortly thereafter, we heard from then Community Elements, now Rosecrans, that Times Center was also going to be making some changes. Times Center is still open. Their level 2 services are still open. They're serving about 20 men, and that's the men that are ready to commit. They're ready for a little more help, but they can be a little bit more independent, and they're working towards their own independence. But that emergency level shelter is no longer available. So we had a gap in our community. And shortly after learning of these gaps, really, we all came together. Mel and the folks at See You at Home, our Continuum of Care, which is a body that meets regularly, and they're actually the funding body. They oversee the funding that comes through HUD and the federal government for shelter and housing in our community. We started talking, our Council of Service Providers to the Homeless, which is a grassroots group of service providers, also started talking, and we realized we got to figure something out and we got to start working on it. At this point, it was June, and here we are, January, February, and we were just able to solve the problem for this winter to meet that need. So what we wanted to do was talk with the service providers and see if anybody that was currently providing shelter would be able to expand and add this to the services they were already providing. We went back to those who had experienced the closures and the changes in their programs, and was there any way we could, rethink that or do something differently so that they could reopen and reestablish some of those services. We exhausted those options. Not that people didn't want to, my goodness, everybody wanted to, but just trying to put those pieces together. Funding is a huge piece of that. And federal funding is changing. It's really relying now on our local communities to provide some of these basic level shelter services. So when we realized we had exhausted what was already available in the community, what shelter providers were doing, they couldn't expand. Folks that had done it previously couldn't go back and do it again. We had to come up with another plan. So we started talking and putting together a model of what it would look like if we paid staff to supervise a program overnight during at least the winter time, trying to at least meet, if we couldn't be open 365 days a year, if we could at least meet that basic human decency, that basic human need in the wintertime when it's extremely cold. We felt like at bare minimum, let's address that. So we started having a lot of conversations, and Melanie was instrumental in talking with churches and bringing people to the table. And so what we looked at was a model where if we could raise the funds locally to pay for staff, because in talking with our great friends at Austin's Place, who do a fantastic job providing shelter for women in the wintertime on an entirely volunteer structure, we know how hard that is. And we knew that men coming into the shelter, there would be more, and we knew that from our point in time counts and from our service providers. We knew that their mental health and substance abuse issues would be pretty extreme as well, and we felt like we couldn't piece together that many nights with volunteer staff. We needed paid professional staff to be in the shelter with the men that we were going to be seeing. So we put that plan together, and we started talking with some local churches, and really that's where Cheryl and her church came and stepped up to the plate. So I'm going to pass it over and let her talk about that. And like I said, Josh will talk about the actual shelter, and then we're going to talk about what's going to happen after this winter.
Thank you. Our church in September and October did a sermon series and a study on how we could be more engaged in the community. We brought in Melanie, Salt and Light, Courage Connection. There were 6 different organizations, and our folks were just very passionate about what they were hearing. This was the same time all the news was coming out about the homeless men's shelters. The church had been involved in the community, but decided they really wanted to be more intentional. So we held a visioning retreat in October, and men's homelessness rose to the top as one of our concerns. We made a decision that we'd readdress the issue come January after the holidays, and that just didn't settle with any of us. So my church basically sent me out into the community, my outreach director, who is right here, and I just immersed myself in the Continuum of Care to the Community Coalition. Spent a lot of time with Melanie, volunteered at the warming shelter, and we just decided that something needed to happen. We first made the decision that we as a church would oversee the plan, but we would find another church that was downtown because we're located down on South Prospect. As many of you know, 2 churches wanted to step up downtown. One in Urbana, one in Champaign, and for different reasons they weren't able to. We had already decided that we could for sure do it Friday and Saturdays if we had to. We didn't feel like we could do it during the week for 2 reasons. One, we have a preschool, And two, we are located right next to Bottenfield Elementary, and we did not want to create any bad feelings with our neighborhood. So I thought, all right, we'll do Friday and Saturdays if we have to. And at that point, First Presbyterian came into the mix. And they said, we can't do it on the weekends because they use their facility so much. We can do it Sunday through Thursday. So to make a long story short, we jumped into action. We started finding volunteers. We helped hire the staff. We found agencies like Two Men in a Truck who are hauling things back and forth with us. Josh found Country Squire cleaners who wash our blankets every week for free. Reached out to churches, community people, worked with United Way, and opened on January 6th. And it has been not easy, but it has been amazing. The men who have come in have been nothing but gracious and respectful, and the volunteers are just amazing. We can't thank the community enough for the dollars that have been raised because we could hire the staff, and because of it, men are not dying out on the streets. In fact, Josh can share, we had to send somebody to the hospital this morning. Had he been out on the streets and had a seizure, who knows what could have happened to him. But Josh got him right to the hospital, and hopefully he's doing better. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh. He has been a blessing to us, has worked his tail off, not only with us, but at Time Center, a great bridge, and we are just thrilled to have him and excited about where we're going to go from here. So it's your turn, sir.
All right. First off, I'd like to thank you guys for all coming out tonight. This has been a huge success so far. A little bit about me. In 2015, I started volunteering at the Time Center as a volunteer because I wanted to give back to the community. I was working on my master's degree in family and consumer sciences from EIU, and Rob Dowhouse allowed me to come in as a volunteer. Everybody liked me, so they ended up offering me a position. So and then I started working overnight, doing the overnight crew from 10 o'clock at night all the way until 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'd house about 20 to 30 people a night. From there I went on to become the case manager, so then I'd get to decide who comes into the Time Center. Man. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was echoing, wasn't it? So I got to, I know a lot of the homeless guys in the community, and became really familiar with them. So it makes my job a lot easier being able to talk to them about issues that are going on in their life and their daily events and any issues that, that they're having. In December, thanks to See You at Home, the Phoenix, they brought me in as the director of the Men's Emergency Shelter. So from there, I started working on, establishing the policies, the guidelines, and, they helped me out doing a intake form and a spreadsheet. Now the spreadsheet is very important because we track who comes into the facility. After about the first week, we were able to alphabetize them by name. So that way when they come in, we ask them if they've been there or not. If they say yes, then we go ahead and we can actually put them on that date as an X, that they've been there. If not, we do a new intake sheet, which is a little bit of information about them, where they last stayed, where's the last shelter, how long they've been homeless, do they have any medical conditions, which is a very important thing, take any medicines, so that way if we have to call an ambulance or CPD or something, we can actually give them the information. So once we opened up, at Faith United Methodist Church on Fridays and Saturdays, we open up the doors at 9:30, we allow people in, we wake them up at 6 o'clock, and they exit the facility at 6:30. Now during that night, what we do is thanks to all the volunteers in the community, we get a lot of donations of snacks, waters, foods, things that guys would like to eat. So some of these guys haven't eaten all day long, or even maybe several days. So they get to come in and, they get a snack. Now when they come in, we'll track them, if they've been there. If not, we'll do new forms. Then we assign them a bed. Now, we can hold up to 30 beds. Thanks to Illini Mattress, they donated 17 mattresses, and that, they did that out of the kindness of their hearts. So that really helped us out to be able to house these individuals per night. And so about 10 o'clock, we shut down the lights, but we leave on a light over the table, so that way the guys can go ahead and, You sit there and socialize with, the other members of the community that are, other residents, have snacks. Then, like I said, we shut out the lights, and at 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock we do checks, just going and making sure that they're breathing. Now we're constantly on the patrol of, walking up and down. So the guys, when they wake up in the middle of the night, they see us, they know we're there. And I think it's kind of it helps them out to be a little more comfortable. It's kind of like a safety issue because they always see us. And, that's probably the reason that we've been as successful as we have. So far, we've housed 63 different individuals for 492 beds, which comes out to 18.9 beds per night. And that's on 26 days. Now, we started a little bit late, so we probably could have hit 600. And I'm predicting just as high, this month. 6 o'clock in the morning, we wake them up, we give them, some snacks, and then we send them about their way. The guys are, are really good. We've had, very minimal problems. I mean, even, the guys that come in late, they just come in, they get their bed, they lay down, and, it's been great. We've been blessed with, CPD, who, if they find guys that are on the street that don't have a place to stay, they'll drop them off to us. And, we've been just as blessed to work with, See You at Homes, Phoenix, because it's like a sister agency. We, communicate on, constantly about individuals that, come in their facility and come in ours. And that helps us. If we have an issue, we can talk to them, as well as if they know something, they can, contribute to us. And it makes it a better, friendlier, safer environment. So, any questions?
What's your maximum capacity?
30. But we have 30 mats. However, if there are more than 30 individuals, we can do makeshift beds. So we have the room in both the facilities. At the Faith United Methodist Church, we could house a lot more if we need to. And then on Sunday through Thursday, we go over to First Presbyterian Church on 302 West Church Street. And so we got, on First Pres Church, we have one section over here, one section over there. We have tables in the middle. So we have a huge section to where we could actually fit, another 20 individuals if need be. And it's really also a blessing for Country Squire cleaners to kind of step up. I was in contact with a lot of people, and they were the ones that said, we can work with you and do your laundry on twice a week. And when you got 24 individuals in night, and then after a while you start running out of sheets. And so it's really a blessing. We've had great volunteers that have been able to drop them off and pick them up, as well as bring in snacks. You bring in sandwiches. These guys appreciate it, especially when they get in things like homemade, sandwiches or cookies. They love it. So we've been really blessed.
I just, before we run out of time, want to talk a little bit about long term. This fall, Melanie will be the first to tell you, we and Beverly, we were working around the clock trying to make this happen, literally right up almost until Christmas Day, which is why we started a week later. And so with the momentum that's going on, we wanted to talk about long term. New Covenant Fellowship was one of the churches that we had hoped to use this year, and because of building code weren't able to. So we have stayed in contact with them, and our dream is to maybe even before the end of this year open up there, shift everything from our two churches over to New Covenant, which is where the Daily Bread Soup Kitchen used to be, and use the last month. We plan to stay open until March 31st. And the goal will be then to hire the same guys or new guys and open from December 1st to March 31st of next year for the next couple of years until See You at Home or Salvation Army might be able to pick this up and do it on a more regular. We just don't want to lose the momentum. We don't want to be scrambling again next year. We are going to have to raise money, so we will be knocking on doors. And we also need to add every one of the Rotaries of this community really stepped up to help. So it has been such a collaborative effort. This could not have happened with just one church or even just with See You at Home. Everybody has worked together. So we're praying and planning. The city of Champaign is working very closely with us to open up at New Covenant Fellowship, again, maybe this year, and hopefully December 1st through March 31st. And then we can continue to keep the folks off the street and give them a safe place to be during the coldest nights of the night. And Doug, raise your hand. There's another one of our staff back there who's just been amazing. So feel free to other questions. I just wanted to make sure, be praying about that for us, those of you that are people of faith. And when we come asking for money, we look forward to the tremendous support that we've had this year. More questions? There's opportunities with the sheets, the blankets. We love to have people come in for registration. We only need 1 or 2. In the mornings, particularly at Faith United Methodist Church on Sundays, we've got to get everything out of there because we do have a worship service in that space. There's opportunities to set up, to unload mats. So we have a calendar, and we're happy to share that with anybody. And the other thing is to donate prepackaged food. I should add tonight, for the first time, Art Mart is dropping off their leftovers over at our church for at least the weekend. So we're very excited about that. She wants to know about the gaps in between, and it's a great question, and I'll turn it over to Josh, but the Phoenix is the best thing. There is an issue particular we have to transport down to our church, and we use Savoy United Methodist. That's another thing we need help with, is driving our van. At this point, we're dropping them off back at a bus stop and giving them a token. If it's really, really cold, the Phoenix will open later. Many of them head over to the train station, so they do what they can. But and we struggle with the fact that we had to go that late and that early, but that's all we really could afford with our staff. So that's a great question. Do you want to add anything?
I just want to wrap up and say, we stressed again, I'm not here to do a fundraising campaign for this, but I do want folks to understand is there's not federal dollars for emergency shelter anymore. That's a change that's happening all across the country. So when we tried to address this need in our community, we have to look at it very creatively, and we have to look at what our funding options and opportunities are in the future. And I know we're going to be talking about working with the faith community, working with churches to make maybe a 2, 3, 4 year commitment to it, so that we have that, so that it can lessen the continual ask that we have to come back to the community. But there's not a set funding stream. There are grants that can be written and things like that, but this type of emergency care, emergency shelter, is not something that's typically funded through grants and things like that either. So I just kind of wanted to stress that's going to be a continual conversation, and that's, even though we have a plan, if we have a place and we have staff, we still always have to come up with the way that it's going to be funded. And again, we'd love to do more than just the winter time, and there's that greater conversation happening back at our continuum of care and our council of service providers of, is winter just enough? How much help is too much help? Should we be doing something year-round? Those are conversations that are still continuing to take place, but for now, we feel like we've got the wintertime addressed. Did you have another question?
It was kind of along that lines. Obviously, Salvation Army, that's part of their mission. Time Center, similarly. There wasn't enough beds at 56. Now we're at 30. Mm-hmm. Maybe we've got some more capacity. What are the roadblocks that need to be overcome in order to get Salvation Army back online, Time Center, and actually increase the number of beds we have above what we had before, or be able to provide additional services?
Sure. Just like the police officer said before, he doesn't want to speak for for anybody else, and I want to be careful with that as well. Those are questions and conversations that are happening within those organizations. We thoroughly vetted that this summer and early fall to make sure that there was not they were not able to do this service, to provide this service at this time. They each have different reasonings behind it. You know, Rosecrans had a merger, you know, and some changes in their program delivery. Again, that funding stream is always a question for them, and Salvation Army as well. You know, they had some debt that they needed to address and take care of, and so that's impacting the programming that they can provide. So I'm sure that they're continuing to talk about it for the future, but they can't commit to anything at this time. But again, I have to preface that that's just me speaking. I don't want to speak on behalf of those organizations. Yes, thank you very much. Donations can be made for this winter and going forward to United Way. You can do it online. You can drop it in the mail, you know, come to the door, whatever. Just put Men's Winter Shelter in the memo line or a sticky note on it, and it will all be used for this winter. And if we have more than what we need for this winter, it will be carried over to address the need next winter as well. Thank you very much. So. Are we fully funded for the winter? No. No. We're close. We're close. So, okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you to Beverly and Cheryl and Josh for doing this.